The Stork Club, Manhattan. February 1946. The second Lucky Luciano stepped into the VIP lounge. Every maid guy and associate at the table jumped to their feet. Except one. Bumpy Johnson didn't budge, just sat there burning a cigar, staring dead at the boss of bosses without blinking. Luciano's security detail went for their heaters, but Lucky stopped them with a wave of his hand. He knew the man sitting across from him held the keys to a kingdom worth more than just brute force. The Harlem numbers game. The next 60 seconds of talk would either seal the biggest deal in the history of the underworld or turn the New York gutters red with blood. It was February 1946. The big war overseas was done, and the country was partying, but in the dimly lit back rooms of the city, a private war was just getting started. Lucky Luciano, the architect who organized the commission, was fresh out of Dannemora after doing a 9-year stretch. Uncle Sam had cut him a break, use his pull on the waterfront to help the war effort, and he'd get out early. Lucky held up his end, but the feds had a condition, a one-way ticket. In under 3 weeks, they were kicking him back to Italy for good, but a man like Lucky wasn't about to walk away without locking down his legacy first. The 5 families were lined up. Frank Costello had the streets under control for the organization. Vito Genovese was plotting his moves from the old country, and Albert Anastasia had a chokehold on the piers. The board was set, except for one loose end: Harlem. The policy game, that illegal lottery printing millions every single week, was a gold mine in Harlem. And the Italians wanted a piece of the action. They took a shot at it back in 1935, when Dutch Schultz tried to muscle in on the territory. But the Dutchman miscalculated. He overlooked a quiet, dangerous operator, a sharp-dressed enforcer named Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Schultz wound up full of lead in a Jersey taproom, clipped before he hit the floor. Now, 11 years down the line, Lucky was eyeing the prize Schultz died trying to grab, but Lucky had brains. He knew storming uptown with Tommy guns was a bad play. You sit down first, you show respect, you make a deal. So he reached out to Johnson. "Let's talk." Johnson made him wait a week before answering. That silence spoke volumes. This wasn't going to be a walk in the park. The Stork Club on East 53rd Street was the toughest ticket in Manhattan. Sinatra sang for his supper there. J. Edgar Hoover wet his whistle at the bar. And on the night of February 18th, 1946, Luciano booked the whole back room. He rolled deep with a crew of 6. Frank Costello, the Prime Minister. Albert Anastasia, the Lord High Executioner himself. Meyer Lansky, the money man. And 3 heavy hitters with plenty of blood on their hands. Johnson strolled in solo. 40 years old, wearing a custom 3-piece suit like it was armor. Midnight blue, starched white shirt. Open collar, the man didn't believe in ties. Gold chain across the vest. Fresh haircut. Shoes shined so bright you could see your face in them. Carried a leather case in his right hand. The muscle stepped up to intercept, itching to draw. Lucky lifted a single finger. "Stand down." Johnson breezed past the hard guys like they weren't there, heels clicking on the marble. He marched to the head of the table, the boss's spot, pulled out the chair, and made himself comfortable. Case on the table, cigar out. The room went ice cold. Costello clenched his jaw. Anastasia reached for his piece, but Lucky just cracked a smile. He knew the game. It wasn't an insult. It was a power move. Johnson was setting the ground rules before a word was spoken. Without a sound, Luciano took the chair opposite him. "Mr. Johnson, appreciate you making the trip." Bumpy fired up his smoke, dragged deep, and exhaled toward the rafters. "Luciano, you called the meeting. Speak." Lucky clasped his hands on the wood. His tone was flat, controlled. The voice of a guy who dealt with politicians and killers alike and knew exactly how to handle both. "I'm shipping out in 3 weeks. The government is punching my ticket back to Sicily, but I need to know the city is squared away before I step on that boat. No headaches, No bodies in the street. Strictly business. Bumpy gave a slow nod, keeping his mouth shut. That situation uptown is the final loose end, Luciano went on. The policy game is printing money. My guys are hungry for a piece, but I know you've been steering that ship since the Dutchman took the big sleep. The neighborhood listens to you. You own the streets. You got the precinct captains in your pocket. He stopped, locking eyes with Bumpy. I ain't looking to rob you, Bumpy. I'm putting a deal on the table. You stay the boss of Harlem. We bring the muscle, the bankroll, and the handshakes downtown. For the trouble. We wet our beaks with 40% of the take. You stay your own man, just under our roof, under our wing. The room went dead silent. Frank Costello leaned in, studying Bumpy's face. Meyer Lansky tapped a rhythm on the wood, calm as a clock. Albert Anastasia popped his knuckles, loud in the quiet. Bumpy just pulled smoke from his cigar. And if I decline? Luciano's grin stayed put, but the warmth left his eyes. Then we have an issue. You're either family or you're a target. And targets don't last long in this town. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He spoke with the cold facts of a man who built a kingdom on graves. Bumpy crushed his cigar in the crystal, popped the latch on his case, and fished out a single photo. He slid it across the mahogany. Lucky grabbed it. His expression held, but his grip turned white on the paper. It was a snapshot of a warehouse out in Red Hook, one of Anastasia's spots. And right there out front, shaking hands with a captain in uniform, was Albert himself. Picture was snapped 3 days back. Bumpy spoke low. I got 12 more in the clip. Different joints, different badges, different soldiers in your crew. The air got thin in that room. Costello reached for the steel under his coat. Anastasia started to rise, looking ready to kill, but Luciano just stared at the picture, then at Bumpy. Is this a threat? No, Bumpy said. It's insurance. I could have mailed these to the D.A. downtown. I could have handed them to the press. I could have burned your whole world down before you finished your morning coffee. But I sat on him. He leaned in closer. You came uptown talking partnership. But partners look each other in the eye. That 40% garbage wasn't a partnership. It was a shakedown with a ribbon on it. Luciano dropped the photo. For the first time, he looked at Bumpy with genuine weight. He actually looked impressed. Name your price. Bumpy lifted his cigar, took a long pull, letting the silence do the work. You're chasing the Dutchman's ghost. Same thing every outfit downtown craves when they look north. Control. But it ain't for sale. Not 'cause you lack the brains, not 'cause you lack the muscle. But Harlem ain't yours to run. He jerked a thumb toward the window, at the city lights. You know why Schultz got clipped? He thought we were simple. Thought we'd just empty our pockets and bow our heads. He thought a gun was enough. But my streets don't work like that. You need the blood. You need the heart. You need to belong. And you fellas, you'll always be tourists. Costello opened his mouth, but Lucky shut him up with a glance. Bumpy went on. Here's how it plays out. You asked for 40. You get 10. 10% on the dollar. Not tribute. A consulting fee. You handle the banking. We need clean cash to pay the winners when the numbers hit big. You handle the lawyers when the heat comes down. For that, you get a dime on every dollar. He sat back, voice heavy and final. And one rule. Your guys never, and I mean never, cross 110th Street to collect. You want your cut? You send a bagman to my headquarters. I will have the cash counted, bundled, and waiting on the desk. But your button men do not patrol my turf. Your heavy artillery does not show up on my block. Harlem remains black. Harlem remains mine. That is the bottom line. The room went dead silent. Meyer Lansky broke the ice. He looked over at Luciano. Charlie, the move makes sense. 10 points for 0 risk. No overhead. No heat. It is clean profit. Anastasia still looked skeptical. And what keeps him from cutting us out once the laundry is running? Bumpy answered before Lucky could speak. The same reason you don't march an army into Harlem. A standoff. You try to screw me, those pictures hit the papers, and your political cover goes up in smoke. I try to screw you. You bring the house down on me, we both bleed, or we both eat. Make the call. Lucky Luciano studied Bumpy Johnson for a long time. Then, a low, genuine laugh rumbled in his chest. No mockery. Just respect. You know what, Bumpy? Schultz was a moron. He should have cleared it with you first. He stood up and offered his hand. 10%. We handle the legal and the banking. My soldiers stay out, and you kick up the cash every month. Bumpy rose. A solid grip. We have a deal. Frank Costello let out a breath. Meyer Lansky grinned. Even Anastasia leaned back, the pressure leaving the room. Luciano held the handshake a second longer than usual. Let me tell you something, Bumpy. I have sat down with presidents, police captains, union bosses, and hitmen. But you? You are the first guy to come to my table and say no without waving a pistol. That takes balls of steel or a death wish. I haven't figured out which one yet. Bumpy smiled, cold but real. When you figure it out, send word. 3 weeks later, Lucky Luciano was on a boat to Italy, deported. He never stepped foot in America again. But the handshake with Bumpy Johnson stood for 22 years. The policy racket exploded. Bumpy kicked up the 10% like a Swiss watch. The Italians washed the money through legitimate shops. When Bumpy took a fall in 1951 and went to Alcatraz, Frank Costello made sure his family never missed a meal. And when Bumpy walked out of the joint in 1963, the arrangement was still solid. That sit-down at the Stork Club became folklore in the underworld. Not for the violence, but because two bosses from different worlds sat across from each other and found a way to earn without going to the mattresses. Luciano later told his crew in Italy, Bumpy Johnson was the smartest operator I ever met. And the most dangerous. He didn't ask for respect. He took it. Bumpy never spoke on the record about it, but his inner circle said he kept that photo of Anastasia in his office until he died. Not as a threat, but as a reminder. True power is not about who pulls the trigger first. It is about having the brains to keep it holstered. If this story of leverage, brains, and the alliance that shifted the mob inspires you, smash that subscribe button and leave a like. Send this to someone who needs to know how the Godfather of Harlem handled business. And tell me in the comments, what would your move be in that room? Stay sharp, protect your territory, and I will see you in the next one.